IB Nation Sports Talk up, rolling. He's Jesse Stiers coming to you from my den. I'm Sean Stiers coming to you from my usual spot in a different part of the house. What about 50, 60 feet away from where Jesse is right now? As we start off the show today, we've got a ton of we in, we out that we're going to do, of course, today. But we start off with some breaking and very unfortunate news for Notre Dame football. The Notre Dame football PR team tweeted out just a few minutes ago, Notre Dame running back Payne had successful reconstructive surgery on the ACL of his right knee. Dr. Brian Radigan performed the surgery, and Payne is expected to miss the entire season. The injury reportedly occurred during the blue gold game. Was it maybe during the play where Payne had that fumble? I'm not sure, but again, very unfortunate news for Notre Dame. Running back depth is very, very good for the Fighting Irish. But Jesse, your initial thoughts upon hearing the news just within the last couple of minutes as we started the show?
Yeah, obviously not great news. Payne was a guy who got some action, last season. Specifically, it felt like he was in heavy goal line type packages. But like you talked about, it sucks for two reasons. One, you never want it to come during the spring game, because the spring game is that's where you just want the ultimate goal of the spring game outside of anything else is for everyone to remain healthy.
Just get out healthy.
Yeah, just get out healthy. And then, obviously it sucks for him because he's got to miss the entire season now. So some immediate thoughts and, kind of moving on past the injury is, how does this affect someone like Jeremiah Love? Are they still going to use him out of the slot, knowing that they have limited running back depth now? Does that change his workload at slot? Is he mainly going to be, running back only? Is his usage still going to remain the same, Because if not to, knock on wood, but if he goes down, you're looking at two of your, quote unquote, probably starting running backs, lead running backs, guys who you're going to get playing time, now are potentially hurt. So then you're really in some trouble. So I guess another aspect of this thing is, how does it hurt, or affect Jeremiah Love? And I think the other part of it now is didn't they have that running back from Penn State that moved over to defense?
Devin
they bring Ford back to the running back room to add more depth?
Well, and here's what the running back room looks like, just to kind of answer some of your questions. You still have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price at the top of the depth chart there. Those two guys were going to be 1-2. They're still going to be 1-2. Payne, number 3 on the depth chart, heading into his junior season now. As you said, where we saw him the most last year was that goal line package, some of the short yardage type situation packages, things like that. That was where he was used the most. Now, I think we expected that even though Love and Price were going to carry the lion's share of the load, those two guys would be 1A, 1B, however you want to look at it, that there was probably an opportunity for an expanded role for Payne as he goes into year 3 now for Notre Dame. But you do still have Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, and we didn't see as much of that, especially Young, late in the spring, because he was nicked up a little bit late in the spring. 2 early enrollee freshmen. Kedron Young, 6 foot, nearly 230 pounds. He's the guy who's kind of in the mold of Audric Estime, obviously, the bigger, powerful back, whereas Aeneas Williams, 5'10", 203, he's not quite hulking, like Audric Estime, doesn't have comical muscles, as Pat McAfee said of Audric Estime when Audric was wearing that basketball jersey when they were here for game day during the season. But at the same time, I don't know if you've seen some of the shots of Aeneas Williams. He's a little yoked up himself. I mean, he's got some arms on him, and he's got some muscle on him, especially for an early enrollee freshman. So you still have 4 very qualified, very good scholarship running backs. I don't know that there is a pressing need to move Devin Ford back there to running back, because I don't know that he would necessarily I think that either Williams or Kedron Young could easily slide into that goal line package type guy. And you still also have a big bodied preferred walk on in Justin Fisher, former Mishawaka quarterback, who is pretty beefed up himself, especially from his high school days. He's listed at 6'2", 223. And I mean, he looks every bit of it, with the arms and the legs and the frame that he has. Like, he's more a true fullback type guy. But again, like when you're talking short yardage blocking, things like that, I don't think that they're necessarily in the kind of position where they have to feel like they've got to slide Devin Ford back over there, to running back as opposed to safety, unless they really want to, because I think that he's still going to have a hard time with all that young talent in that room. I think he would still have a hard time even kind of, forging out some kind of true role for himself, even with that long list of jobs that Dela McCullough has for the running backs.
Yeah, I think I'm most excited to see, how I was excited to see basically the three-headed monster of Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Jabron Payne. I'm curious to see now how they kind of recalibrate here a little bit. But like you were saying, it doesn't really affect the starters too much, because Jeremiah Love was going to be your starting running back and Jadarian Price was going to be the guy to relieve him. We were just going to see Jabron Payne likely like we did last year in specific, down and yardage situations or specific, spots on the field, basically the goal line. So while it sucks, this is why Notre Dame continues to recruit the running back position, and really every other position to have. This is why you want to have quality depth, right?
Right.
And with the transfer portal, I think it's harder and harder to have quality depth, because if you're good enough, you're going to want, you feel like you should have the option to be a starter somewhere. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, they continue to recruit and get commitments from high caliber running backs as well. They've got 2 in the 2025 class will be coming in next year as well, in Justin Thurman and Daniel Anderson, as things stand right now. Both of them a couple of 4-star guys, and both of them rated among the the higher, well, I guess not necessarily at the top of the rung in terms of some of the ratings that they've got, but in the top half of the class anyway. Both of them considered 4-star type guys for next year's class. But I think the question that you posed is a legitimate one, though. When you are going to be down an experienced running back like Jabron Payne, and you are expecting the wide receiver room to be much improved with all of the additions that you've put into it, between bringing in Chris Mitchell, the development of Jaden Greathouse, bringing in Bo Collins, even bringing in Jaden Harrison, even though you're still primarily looking at him as a kick returner. And obviously you've got Jordan Faison right there. I mean, that's 5 guys right there. And that's not even including Micah Gilbert, of course, who had a really nice spring. Cam Williams had a solid spring. So how much do you want to, how many extra reps, I guess, do you want to put on Jeremiah Love, or do you still need to sort of put more receiver reps on Jeremiah Love, just to even if it's just to kind of give opposing defenses different looks with 21 personnel as opposed to 11 personnel and that kind of thing, where you've got both Price and Love potentially on the field at the same time? Do you still want to put a heavier load on him by keeping him out there on the field that much when you are lacking that experienced guy like Jabron Payne?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of like 2 questions that have to be answered when looking at, does this affect someone like Jeremiah Love? The first one would be, is it a matter of just touches, right? Like, we just want Jeremiah Love to touch the ball X amount of times, and we
Right.
don't care how he gets them. Then,
because he's an explosive, dynamic
right
player, so you want the ball in his hands.
Whether it's, a 5-yard out route, a go route, or just a straight handoff out of the backfield, I lean to believe that it's all about the touches. How many touches can they get him, in a game combined, because he's one of your more explosive players. And then, the other one would be, does it play into more of what you were talking about too, of like personnel? Does Mike Denbrock want specific personnel looks? Because that is, basically part of the formula for his offense, right? Because a lot of good offensive coordinators show you one thing, and then midway through the season, they kind of start developing off of that, right? Like
Yeah.
they show you, and then now they hit you with something that they haven't shown you yet. And so is that what they're trying to accomplish with maybe 11 personnel, 21 personnel, that sort of stuff with Jeremiah Love, is giving a certain look, and then as the season progresses and the offense kind of, as you could say, like develops or matures, are they going to start expanding on new stuff based off of, this Jeremiah Love presence, whether he's in the slot, in the backfield, motioning to either one of those? And I think that is also has to be a part of it too, because I think Denbrock has like a system to his offense for wanting, specific looks, because that is the natural progression of his offense.
Yeah, exactly. I think that there are still a lot of options. It's just now the fall training camp becomes more important. It's going to be, especially after what they saw from both Love and Jadarian Price this spring, they know what they're going to get from them. Now it's about really finding out, I think, between the next two guys, Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, who is the number 3 guy, who's the guy who fits, like that goal line type back or the short yardage type situations and stuff like that. That's the training camp just shifts a little bit now because you don't have Jabron Payne, because he is going to miss the entire season, as they said in their release there today. Now, Andre asking, can that player get a medical red shirt so he can still have 2 years to play? Absolutely, because now, like the COVID year of eligibility, this is the last year for it, essentially. Like if like the freshmen, I believe, what was that, 2020? Those freshmen, this is the last class coming into this upcoming academic year. This is the last class that gets the COVID season of eligibility, the 5th season of eligibility. So now you go back to the old, you have 5 years to play 4 seasons model, which means that you can, red shirt, whether it's medical or sitting or whatever. So yeah, Jabron Payne would fit that. He would qualify for a medical red shirt because he's going to miss the entire season. So he would absolutely be able to get a medical red shirt and still have 2 seasons to play, basically. Yeah, and for those coming in late, because I'm looking at the chat, there are still some people, and kind of the number count here, there are some people filtering in. Jabron Payne, Notre Dame announced today, Jabron Payne tore his ACL. He had surgery, and he is going to miss the entire 2024 season. So no Jabron Payne for the upcoming season, and that's kind of where we started here today. Before we get into we in or we out, and Jess, we've got a ton of we in or we out that we're going to get to here in a little bit. Other breaking news, the Chicago Bears are going to be the Hard Knocks team this season. That's one I think we'll save and get Vince's thoughts on that as a resident Bears fan on tomorrow's show. But first, one more thing. I agree with what Joe is asking. He's not stating. He says, are they going to workhorse Love like Parker did? I doubt it, because Denbrock is more creative. And I assume you're meaning workhorse Love like Parker did with Audric Estime. You workhorse Audric Estime, and he had minimal carries his first couple of years. So Audric Estime wanted the rock as much as possible. So I think that there was no reason not to workhorse him. But I do think you're right. Denbrock is more creative, and because you have two athletes with the skill sets of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, you can get even more creative. And there's a lot of things that you can do mixing and matching. And as I've said before, like if you're going to switch to 21 personnel, that just puts defenses even more in distress, because now it's like, okay, they're both out there on the field, or let's say Jadarian Price was already on the field. Now Jeremiah Love comes running on the field, and now so the other offense, or the other defense rather, has to figure out, okay, where's Love going to line up? What's the matchup going to be? Who are we going to put on Love if he lines up as a wide receiver? And even the same with Price, for that matter, because he lined up as a receiver a little bit this spring, and I think he'll do some of that. So that's just that much more, and you can speak to that a little bit, Jess, as an offensive guy, that's just, you know, especially as a linebacker whose, you know, primary responsibility was running backs and such, just what that does to you as a defense when they are switching personnel groupings like that. You've got a couple of running backs instead of 3 wide receivers potentially out there.
Yeah, I think what you would see out of that is, as a linebacker, if a running back lines up in the backfield and they motion into the backfield or to the slot, immediately your eyes, you're recalibrating, because that can offset your strength of the for setting the strength of your defense, what you need to audible to coverage wise. And to me, and this just can't kind of came to mind here, but if I'm Notre Dame and we come to the line of scrimmage and you get a look and then it's okay, let's motion Jeremiah Love out to the slot, then Riley Leonard can recount the box. And then from there, I just think you're going to see a lot of RPO stuff come off of when Jeremiah Love is in the slot with 2 running backs, because imagine, basically an RPO scheme with Riley Leonard in the backfield where he's got the option to hand it off to Price, pull it and run himself, or pull it and throw the ball to Jeremiah Love out in the flat, right? And so I think that's a lot of what you're going to see, and that's so hard for the defense to react to, because not only one, do you have to adjust based off the running back motioning out of the backfield, but then now you have to get into the mindset of the quick pace of an RPO, right? Like the quick read, flashing to your man if you're on Jeremiah Love. And so when you already have someone fast like Jeremiah Love, and then you're doing RPO and you're freezing the linebacker, you're just giving Jeremiah Love that much more space to operate out there. So that's the kind of stuff I would expect, now that I really think about it, is when Jeremiah Love's in the slot and you have another running back in the backfield, it'd be a can of corn RPO, and Riley Leonard just has to sit there and read whatever that swing linebacker is doing. Is he going to play off to Jeremiah Love, or is he going to hang around in the box and be an extra run defender?
Great breakdown, Jess. We what we should have had was a whiteboard there. I think if you would have had a whiteboard, you would have made a lot of people happy right now. And again, we have more people filtering into the live show here on YouTube, so I just went ahead and kind of put it up on the screen for anybody still coming in. Payne did have ACL surgery today. Notre Dame announced it just as the show was getting ready to start here this afternoon, and Payne is going to miss the entire 2024 season. So do you think Devin Ford does go back to running back? Do you need 5 running backs over there? Can you get by with 4 running backs, and then the walk-on situation? They've got a couple of walk-ons there, including Justin Fisher, or do you need Devin Ford over there to fill one of those roles, do you think?
I think you have to. I think you start with what you have. I think you give these freshmen an opportunity. And if they can't step up, you have an experienced guy who can easily slide back over, whatever that might be. Maybe they're lacking in pass protection. Maybe they're lacking in, 3rd and short situations, whatever it might be. I think you give the young, talented freshman the opportunity first, because what advantage do you get for giving that to Devin Ford? He's going to be out of here in a semester, right? And so it's just, there's no return on investment by giving Ford that playing time. You give it to these freshmen, you allow them to basically step up and try to, rise to the occasion. And if they simply cannot do it, 3-4 games in, then I think you would look into sliding Devin Ford back to running back.
Yeah. And I completely agree with a couple of these comments, just like Joe Allen is saying. Depends on more injuries. Michael's saying Ford is the emergency situation. And I completely agree with that. I think that you go with the 4 scholarship running backs that you have: Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Kedron Young, Aeneas Williams. And as Jesse said, if one of the freshmen can't produce, or you end up with an injury at some point during the season, then you can slide Devin Ford back over as an emergency guy at that point. But I don't think going into the season you need to move Devin Ford there, because there's, like you said, way more upside for the future by going with those young guys, letting them develop and giving them those opportunities instead. All right. DK, thanks for the super chat ×2. He slipped it in there once again. So you've got to answer this question, apparently, from DK. What's the one thing you've done you never wanted your parents to know?
Probably, I mean, there's like, you got to keep it PG on this thing.
Yes.
Probably, consumed alcohol younger than what I probably should have is the nice, safe answer to go with right there.
That's probably the one to go with. Yes. Probably the one. I won't say we've all done it, but a lot of us have done it, right? Like,
now, what age that was, that's a different question. That's a different story. But
yes,
it was probably, it was definitely sooner than probably what was.
I always wondered, like, most of the time when I got home back in high school, the parents were in bed already. But there were a couple times where I remember, getting home and they're up and I'm kind of swaying, as I'm trying to talk to them and what exactly I sounded like, how much they knew that they never let on to, like with that specific thing that you're talking about, the underage consumption. Well, Jesse, let's get into these we in, we outs, because we've got a ton of them to get to here. And we are going to, I know Brian obviously addressed the USC Notre Dame stuff in his show earlier today, and I'm sure that he spent a lot of time on it. We will address that in rapid fire, so we'll be saving that aspect for rapid fire and just a ton of other things to get to in the meantime. Starting with Joe, we in or we out. 2 or more Notre Dame coaches get hired for either head coaching jobs or coordinator positions.
I'm going to say we in on that one because I think this last cycle, it was really close. And like Dylan McCullough to me is like a given, right? It's just a matter of
feels like it.
When. And then I think you could either go Al Washington. I think you could go the Mike Mickens would obviously make a good choice at some point. Maybe Al Golden goes on to be a head coach somewhere. I just think with the amount of possibilities that are there, and I think Notre Dame is, or at least in my opinion, Notre Dame is going to consistently keep getting better and better, and be a team that continues to kind of make the playoffs in this expanded format. It's just naturally, I think that's what's going to happen. So I'm gonna say we in on that one.
I'm in on definitely one. I'll just kind of piggybacking on what you're saying. You're going exactly down the line of thinking. The more success you have, the more you're going to lose assistant coaches. You like if you're winning, your assistant coaches become hot commodities. Obviously, the head coach becomes a hot commodity as well, but everyone underneath them becomes commodities. And if they get to the college football playoff, especially if they go deep into the college football playoff, you've already seen a ton of interest in Marcus Freeman's guys the last 2 years, and you're going to see even more. So the odds say yes, and I'm actually going to switch it up. I will go all in on 2. If they're a playoff team, I will go in. I know that's not the question, but I'm assuming they're going to be a playoff team. I think they will be. They're going to be a playoff team. So I'm going to go. I'm going to go we in on that. Real quick, DE had a good follow-up on the Payne news. He says, does it change the roster number on scholarships? No, it does not. Even though you're injured, you are still on scholarship. So it's not like, oh, you're going to injured reserve, so that doesn't count against your scholarship limit. He's still getting a scholarship. He is still on the team, so it still counts against your scholarship limit. Like that's – it sucks enough that, you're not going to have him, but that does not help that situation, basically. Okay. From Domer Grizz, a regular contributor on the Champions Lounge. And I guess we should reiterate that all the questions for We In, We Out come from the Champions Lounge. It's the only place that you can get your questions in. The drop-off from Xavier Watts to his backup is greater than any other position on defense? We in or we out on that?
That's so hard. I'm looking at the depth chart right now.
I'm going to go out just because the cornerback ranks are thin right now. I think basically across the board in the secondary, the front end guys, there's going to be considerable drop off. So I don't think there's necessarily more drop off from Xavier Watts down to Luke Talich than, you know, what you're going to have at cornerback potentially, like going from Jaden Mickey potentially to Chance Tucker, for example, or, you know, going from Christian Gray to Leonard Moore, an incoming freshman. And that's assuming, you know, because we still don't know what's going to happen with Benjamin Morrison's health. So I am out on this just because I think that is where Notre Dame is thin. Like the front end talent is really good across the board, but I think there's going to be pretty good drop offs. You know, like if Benjamin Morris is healthy and Christian Gray is the number 2, you know, that there's obviously not going to be much drop off there, but I've got to be out on that one. But I did like that question.
No, it's a really good question. It's definitely thought provoking. Really, I think this comes down to I do agree that safety, because I'm assuming Benjamin Morrison's health is good, and between Mickey, Gray, and Morrison, I think the corners will be taken care of. Really, the positions I look at are the will linebacker or your weak side linebacker. You know, whoever's behind Jack Kaiser. Kahano Kia is behind him. Preston Zinner is also back there. And then behind Xavier Watts is, you know, Ben Minnick and Kennedy Urlacher. The thing about the free safety position, in my opinion, is I think Ben Minnick is super talented. He's just super young. So we haven't had the opportunity.
There's just no experience. Yeah.
There's just no actual game experience. And I think it's harder to be a young and inexperienced linebacker, and that's just my opinion, than it is to be a safety. I think there's more to be worried about as a linebacker. So I would say the position group on the defense that has the biggest drop-off right now for me is the will linebacker.
Okay. I think Jaden Osbury probably ends up getting some of those reps, kind of depending on how things go. I mean, he's still considered the number 2 rover, but based on the way they were talking about him playing all these different positions at the end of spring, I think he might end up being the number 2 will linebacker over there. You know, Brent says Adon Schuler is going to have a breakout season.
I like Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick. I just don't think they had the opportunity to play a lot. You know what I mean? And so like that's why I'm not really worried about the fall off for them, is because I think they have enough athleticism and talent. And again, it's a free safety position. It's harder. It is harder to play at a high level at linebacker than it is at a safety position, just because of you just have more responsibility. You know, as a safety, you're really only worried about
patting the linebackers game on the back again.
Well, you're really only worried about the pass game and occasionally coming down and filling the alley on a busted run play. Okay. As a linebacker, you have a run and pass responsibility every single play.
Okay. So the other question, the drop-off from Charles Jagasaw to his backup at left tackle, which is Sullivan Absher, will be greater this season than the drop-off from Riley Leonard to whoever ends up being QB2. I'm definitely in on that because, as I've said before, Steve Angeli, even assuming it's Steve Angeli, which it is as of right now, he can go out and win. He can go out and win at least 9 games this season. So, you know, I'm not worried about that. The only place I'm worried about Steve Angeli is the big games. So, whereas Sullivan Absher, you've got no experience, and Charles Jagasaw at least played pretty well in the
I mean, the way I look at this is if Jagasaw goes down, neither of your quarterbacks have time to throw the ball.
Yeah. Good point. Doesn't matter who it is.
Doesn't matter who it is. Neither guy is going to have okay. It would be, you remember those like first couple games with Jack Cohn and the offensive line was just horrible and they couldn't get it figured out. That's what it would essentially be like. No matter who the quarterback is, they would struggle to have any sort of pass protection. So it'd be a lot of quick plays, getting the ball out, runs, etc. Not a lot of drop back passes. And like you said, if Leonard goes down and Angeli or whoever comes in, you're still probably going to win 9 or 10 games.
Right. Yep. Exactly. There's it's definitely much greater from Jagasaw to Absher, and it's not a knock on Absher. It's the guy's not experienced, so we haven't had to, been able to see him play yet. So, okay. When it comes to the second string quarterback this season, it will be Angeli on the depth chart. However, if something were to happen that made Leonard out for a long period, they would bump up CJ Carr and effectively work out the future. We in or are we out on this one from God Country Notre Dame Barbecue, Jesse?
This is a controversial question. This
is what I call a wishful thinking question, is what I call this. But
this is going to get a lot of people fired up. So I think there's two perspectives on this. If I were the coach, it would be CJ Carr. Marcus Freeman coach, it will not be CJ Carr, because at the end of the day, you're still Notre Dame. You're still, a nationally broadcasted team, every home game on NBC, right? And so there's just there's no time for experiments at Notre Dame. The expectation is still wins, and Angeli is the safe answer that is, is probably going to go out there, and he's not going to do anything extraordinary, but he's not going to do anything to cost you the game. A young, inexperienced quarterback can still do a lot of things to cost you a game. And so I just think for that reason, it would have to be Angeli. So we out.
Yeah, exactly. And who just said it? DJ. Marcus Freeman wants the experience, and that is exactly right, because we know for a fact, especially the first game, going on the road, Texas A&M, if something happened to Riley Leonard, there's no way CJ Carr is seeing the field in that game. Just think about Ohio State and kind of how, conservative they played it with inexperienced quarterbacks and all that. Angeli at least has experience, and that's going to matter. And again, now that doesn't mean that at some point during the season, maybe their opinion shifts. If the Leonard thing was a permanent situation where Angeli is bumped up, so things can obviously change over the course of the season, but I don't think that is their mindset right now, because they still have to play it like even no matter who you lose, the goal is still to win games. And I think that, at least in their eyes, the way they view it right now, Angeli right now, where we stand heading toward the season, gives them a better chance to win games because of the experience that he has. There was a follow-up to the offensive line question. Josh says, are we forgetting about Gerby Lambert in the fall? Not forgetting about him, but we don't know where he's going to play yet. We don't know if he's going to back up Charles Jagasaw. We don't know if he's going to find himself in the mix over on the right side and maybe even end up the number 2 over there, or maybe, so we don't know where he's going to be yet. And he's a true freshman. I think a lot of people are still banking a lot on a true freshman to be able to come. Remember, it's very rare, as good as Gerby Lambert,
especially at an offensive line position.
Right. It is still very rare for a true freshman to walk in and start anywhere on the offensive line as a true freshman, let alone at one of the tackle spots. So, now again, I know Josh isn't saying that he's going to be a starter, but we don't know. We just don't know where he's going to be yet. So let's kind of wait until he gets here and we get to actually see him take some snaps during training camp before we start.
I think maybe about a more fun question would be say Leonard does something to be out for the year. The immediate answer is Angeli, but come playoff and bowl game potentially, could you see some CJ Carr, because he's had a whole nother year to develop and practice, right? I think that's more of a realistic kind of situation.
Yeah. He'll literally, by the time the playoffs roll around,
because like we talked about, Angeli isn't
for a full year.
Angeli isn't a difference maker. And so when you get to those games, I think it's okay to throw it out the window and say, we're willing to kind of live or die here a little bit, because, we want the boom plays that CJ Carr can provide, but also can live with potentially, a bad turnover that maybe Angeli wouldn't quite create.
Yes. Rabid Now Chihuahuas says during each Notre Dame game this year, there will be at least one reference to Riley's mom texting him, "You suck." When are we out on that?
Each Notre Dame game this year, I'm gonna
I'll
say
say they
we
come
out.
up in all the road games or most of the road games. I'm out for every game, but the
Yeah,
road games they'll come up because ESPN, CBS, whoever gets
they're
it,
gonna act like
they'll
the
work it.
Notre Dame fans haven't heard that storyline, even though it's their first time introducing it.
Yes, yes. By the way, I got Coach Bent 574's comment. He was the first one, or at least the first one to make a comment in here. He had a comment about someone else talking about the Notre Dame USC Cowherd position, and again, we will save that for rapid fire. We in or we out on Louisville being the Peacock only game. Seems like a horrible move from Sean Kelly 15. We talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show. What do you think about the Louisville game being the streaming only game and not on NBC?
Honestly, I don't care which game it is because as long as they just got to meet their quota, right? Of whatever game it might be. I wish, I guess, that they would maybe throw like one of those MAC games on there, right? Just to kind of get it over with, because Louisville is more, to me, like a middle tier type of game if you're looking at the entire season. And, you got to look at it too as a Notre Dame fan. They got to get revenge on what Louisville did, to Notre Dame last season. And so I don't want to watch that game on Peacock. So I am out on that. I think if you're going to subject us to Peacock, you move one of the lower tier games over there, not a middle tier to upper tier kind of game.
John says it matters if you don't have Peacock, and what the sports world is coming to now. We mentioned it with the like the Christmas games a couple weeks ago when they were announced that they're going to Netflix. I mean, you need Netflix, you need Amazon, you need Peacock, you need broadcast TV, you need cable TV to be able to watch all these games. I mean, that's what the sports world is coming to, and for all the reasons that you mentioned, Jess, that's why they're pushing this game, the Notre Dame Louisville game, to Peacock, because again, NBC didn't make this decision on their own. A few years back, Jack Swarbrick talked about the fact that he wanted a higher profile game to be on, the streaming game to see what kind of numbers they could do with it. And so now, because Louisville beat Notre Dame last season, and because this is a revenge situation for Notre Dame, I think they're banking on, even though it's the second most high profile game on the home schedule for the Irish, they're going to put it on Peacock, and they're banking that people are going to go over to Peacock and pay for that subscription to Peacock so they can watch it, and then forget about the fact that they paid for that subscription and hope that they are still Peacock customers a year later when the next Notre Dame game comes around. I mean, that's part of the deal. Get that credit card information, get those subscriptions, and see what kind of numbers they can do. I think they want to see if they can get some bigger numbers with a game like Louisville, instead of just pretty much what we've had in the past is 3 MAC games, a Boston College game, and a UNLV game. Those have been the games that have ended up on Peacock. And yeah, I mean, Joe's absolutely right. A lot of people, you buy the subscription, then you unsubscribe after the game. But what they're banking on is that people forget to unsubscribe after the game, which happens a lot. A lot of conversions that way. Yes.
Got a funny story. I bought Peacock. What was the first Peacock game? Was it the Toledo?
Yes.
Toledo game 2 years ago? 3
Oh,
years
it's
ago?
more than
maybe?
that. It's like 4 or 5 at this point, I think. Yeah.
I have, over the last few months, finances are shrinking a little bit. So I was like, let me just go through all my subscriptions and make sure I don't have anything unwarranted. I finally canceled my Peacock like a week ago, and I had it ever since the Notre Dame Toledo game. So it works.
Wow.
That's the reason why, right?
There you go.
They had me in for 3
Case
years.
in point.
I think the only thing I ever used it for is when Naomi wanted to watch one of her shows that was on demand on Peacock.
Isn't there some kind of one of those dating reality shows or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find the date on this. It was, I can't find the year on it. Here it is. 2021. So it's been almost 4 years since Notre Dame and Toledo played. There you go. Okay, from Fish ND, we were just talking about Benjamin Morrison. We in or we out on whether Morrison's going to be ready to go week 1 in College Station. Now, Michael saying cleanup procedure is what he had, and he's had the sling off and stuff like that. I tell you, where you find out is Benjamin Morrison is doing a camp down at, I think it's Brophy Prep in Phoenix this weekend.
We need a field rep.
Yeah, so if you live in the Phoenix area, head out to Brophy Prep. I'll find the time here in just a second. If you've got like a kid, let me see.
See if he shows up in a sling or no sling.
Yeah, see if he's running around out there with no sling. I'm trying to
whether or not we see him
account.
or whether or not we get some ground intel, I think he's going to be ready to go game 1. I think that the reason why they did it as early as they did is they didn't want it to turn into something more serious down the road, essentially, right? Like, let's get this thing cleaned up, addressed now. You sit out, etc., etc. And by the time next season starts, we're going to be ready to go. So I think he's going to be ready to go. So I'm going to go we in.
Yeah, I can't find his Twitter account, even though there's like all these different Benjamin Morrisons. Oh, here he is. BMO. The camp is this Saturday, June 1st, 8 a.m., Brophy College Prep, Phoenix, Arizona, grades 6 through 8. Attendance is free. So if you have a 6th through 8th grader, get them out to Brophy College Prep, 8 o'clock Saturday morning in Phoenix, and then be sure and take a picture of Benjamin Morrison and send it to us and let us know what his health looks like out there. That's how to do it. Get out there and do it. Good point, Ben or Brent. 22 likes. Come on, hit the like button. Joe, yes, Benjamin Morrison's camp is free out there. So maybe you even just drive out yourself and go out. DK says he'll fly out. So
that's
I'm leaning towards in on this, but I do want to, having not seen him without his sling here recently, I do want to see that. 13 reasons why. Notre Dame's great season showcasing the talent will have recruiting services start to rank Notre Dame recruits more accurately. We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we in on this one. And I don't know. I think even if it's a little bit more, that's considered an increase, right? But I think you're going to start, especially this season, you're going to see a lot of young Notre Dame players get the opportunity to play in a much larger expanded role, right? Like Jagasaw, Drake Bowen is going to get a great opportunity. KVA is going to get a great opportunity. Jeremiah Love is going to get a great opportunity. Jadarian Price is going to get a great opportunity. Some of these young wide receivers, Greathouse, maybe Cam Williams, Micah Gilbert. I think that you're going to see more of these guys produce, and that's naturally going to be like, oh, maybe these players were a little bit better than expected. But this is what I'm so excited about. I think I've talked about this a lot. This is what I'm most excited about in year 3 of Marcus Freemaners. These are Marcus Freeman recruits, right? Like, these are Marcus Freeman guys who are now going to get their opportunity in a full cycle of playing at Notre Dame. So I'm going to say we in as an optimist.
Yeah, I'm hesitantly in on this as well. I think that there are guys, and we've seen them, just like the thing leaving Notre Dame out of the top 35 teams. Remember a few weeks back, stuff like that. Look, there's bias in every profession, and there's obviously some bias in the recruiting profession. I think that as Notre Dame has more success and with the likability of Marcus Freeman and his staff, that we do see a change in this going forward. I think that there is something to that, especially because Marcus Freeman is going to be attached to it. Hesburgh Mafia. Lincoln Riley will never have another Heisman Trophy winning quarterback in his career. We in or we out on that?
Oof. So this is a tough one because to me, the biggest question is Lincoln Riley ever going to make the transition to the NFL? And I just simply don't know. But it seems like to me, his whole niche or calling ahead of being a head coach is the guy loves to work with quarterbacks, right? Like he loves to like it was Kyler Murray, it was Caleb Williams, Spencer Rattler,
Baker Mayfield,
the guy who just left USC, even though I can't think of his name.
Caleb
Williams. Sorry, Caleb Williams. Yeah, so I think that is the thing he enjoys the most. I don't know about his NFL aspirations, but I would just have to say we in because of he's established himself as the quarterback guy in college, right?
I think you mean you're out then. You're saying he will have a Heisman.
Oh, sorry, yeah, he will have another because again, whether or not the team is successful, all of these quarterbacks know, okay, I go to Lincoln Riley, I'm going on to the NFL. Like the formula is very simple. So he's going to continue to get elite quarterback after elite quarterback. So, I mean, sooner or later, you're going to hit on that thing again when you're getting the best quarterbacks year in and year out. So I'm just going to have to say we out because I think he is going to get another one.
Yeah. The odds say he's going to. I mean, he's got an amazing track record with those three guys just in the last few years, Mayfield, Murray, and Caleb Williams. As long as he stays in college, he's going to have another one. And we know he's running the offense. I feel like Brent is poking at you a little bit here.
This is a very easy question. I mean, there's a reason why one is very, very successful in the NFL.
Is Lincoln Riley or Kyle Shanahan the better offensive mind?
It's no doubt Kyle Shanahan.
I agree. I may not like the 49ers, but
dude's a scheme wizard.
Yeah. It's
why they dominate the Cowboys because he just out schemes them and knows what their tendencies are, and they fall right into him every year.
Yeah. To be fair, he does it to a lot of teams, but he schools that fool down there in Dallas. That's what he does. Irish Mosaic. Does Notre Dame call it good on wide receiver recruiting for the 25 class and bank as many possible spots for the 26 receiver class? Fill in any gaps with a portal addition versus dipping too far down the 25 board. Now, Jess, obviously you don't follow recruiting that closely. I don't follow it that closely, but this is one of the spots where they've been in pursuit here, kind of down the, not really down the stretch, but they've remained in pursuit. I think that they've got, 22 commits right now in the, 22 commits in the 25 class. Receiver is the spot where I think that they still really want to get a hit. They've got 3 solid commits in the class with Elijah Burris, Sean Terry, and Jerome Bettis Jr., but I think that they would still, like to, kind of hit a little bit higher if possible. Those are all pretty good developmental type guys, and there's still some great upside with them. But I mean, guys like Derek Meadows and Tanook Hines, I think, are two of the big guns that they're still after, and they'd really like to, be able to get at least one of those guys. I know Dylan Robinson is someone who they kind of got in on late, and they're working there, but they would like to get one of those 3 guys still. So I don't think that they're going to call it quits with this, with receivers in the current class, but they'd still like to try to get a hit on one of those 3 guys. So they're not cashing it in just yet. Harry Doyle, Notre Dame women's basketball will make it to the Final Four. We in or we out?
I'm going to say we in on this, and I'll keep this one short. I felt like the last 2 seasons, their season has ended at the Sweet 16. In each of those seasons, I thought that they were the better team and probably were an Elite 8 team. And now that you get reinforcements and, upgrading the roster, I'm just going to have to say we in. Based on that alone, I think you are at least one round better than what you were the last 2 seasons.
Definitely in on that. I've said all along that if everyone was healthy this year, this past season, Final Four would have been the expectation. And with everything that they've got both coming back and coming in now with a couple of transfer portal forwards coming in, you get Maddie Westbeld back. You're going to get Olivia Miles back, obviously, and Hannah Hidalgo. They're just, they're going to be stacked. And Final Four is the expectation. And I absolutely think with the just deep talent they've got on that team that they will be a Final Four team next season. Payne Shalala. By the end of this season, Notre Dame will be considered a top 15 offense and a top 10 defense. We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we in.
We definitely in on this. And I think top 15 offense is probably right around where they're going to be, but I think they'll be a top 5 defense. So I think they'll be even higher than what he's saying defensively. I think that with everything that they've got and the 2 coordinators that they've got, they will absolutely be that, basically he's saying, top 20 in both, but I think they'll be a top 10 defense and a top 15-ish offense. I think a lot of people are in on that as well. Brent was asking if we talked about the Cowherd thing. Brian did talk about that on his show, Cowherd and USC and Notre Dame. We will be leading rapid fire off with that once we get to rapid fire here in a little bit. But again, Brian did address some of that, some of his own take on that earlier today, but we will be talking about it. Another one from Payne, pineapple on pizza. Where do you stand on that? In or out?
Out. Big out.
It is actually underrated. I haven't done it in years and years and years. It is not as bad as a lot of people make it out to be. So I will go in, not that I'm going to go out and actively pursue a pineapple pizza, but if somebody had a pineapple and Canadian bacon or a pineapple and ham pizza, I would not turn it down by any means. So I will go in on that. Sloppy Joe, not only does he listen to Gore, but he's big on the pineapple, ham, and jalapeno pizza. So,
don't get me wrong here. Like if I was presented with like a ham and pineapple pizza and I hadn't ate in a day and I don't really have many other options, I'm not going to say no. But I'm just saying if I get a pizza, there 10 out of 10 times there will
you're
be
not
no
getting any pineapple on your
Yeah.
pizza. I can see that. Tommy Guns. I don't even know if Tommy's here tonight, but he says Riley Leonard is a preseason Heisman contender simply for being a Leonard. We in or we out on that?
I'm going to say we out.
Yeah,
but
sorry, Tommy.
I do appreciate the question.
But Tommy is in on the pineapple on the pizza, which is good to know. All right, switching over. Page 2. Again, we'll be getting to the Colin Cowherd stuff in a little bit. Coach Freeman will have at least 3 national championships before he leaves Notre Dame. We in or we out on that one?
Whew.
Lofty.
I'm going to just say we out. I know DK is going to get all mad at me and say I'm not a Notre Dame fan. That's just a lot. The Urban Meyer didn't do that. Just go on. I mean, really the only person that's
other than Nick Saban, what coach has.
Yeah. And so it's just like, if we're being logistic and honest about this thing and rational, I'm just going to have to say we out, while I would love it to happen though.
I'm out on it as well. I think one could be coming within the next 4 or 5 years. I think I might have even said 3 years at one point. Would a second one come? I don't know. I've got to be out on 3 though, because again, like who's done it so far? Like even why am I drawing a blank? Georgia, what's his name?
Kirby
Smart. Thank you. Even he hasn't won 3 yet, and they're obviously very good year in and year out. So I'm going to go out on 3, but I'm definitely in on 1. Another one from Tommy. The defensive line will have eye-popping stats this season, but it'll be because of the back seven aerial lockdown of opposing teams' pass game. In or out on that?
So basically what he's saying, because usually it's like, a good
Coverage sacks is what he's
yeah,
saying.
yeah. Usually you have a good defensive line that maybe forces some bad throws and, like the Caleb Williams games, but he's saying role reverse, the defense is just so shut down that you start getting coverage sacks and stuff like that. I'm not going to say eye popping, but I'm in on the defensive line having better stats this season. How about that?
I think they will as well. Sloppy Joe, obviously, like a lot of people, not convinced about Jordan Botelho. We need a Viper who can get pressure on the quarterback, he says. I still think that while you would like more pressure from the Viper position, I don't think it's as dire as most people make it out to be because of the fact that you have those two disruptive guys in the middle in Cross and Riley Mills. I think you're going to get every bit the same production from the big defensive end spot with RJ Oben as what you got from Jean Baptiste last year. And because of the way they blitz and because they're so unpredictable with where their blitzes are coming from on any given play, I think that they're still going to get a lot of pressure and still rack up a pretty nice number of sacks. So they're going to continue to be disruptive up front, but I think it's going to be, like to Tommy's point, I think it's going to be pretty complementary. The secondary and the front are going to complement each other quite a bit. It was an interesting perspective on that one, though. Audric Chestame asking about Notre Dame USC again. We'll get to that here in a little bit. Audric Chestame also says after NBC announced that the Louisville game will be on Peacock this year, they will look to put an even more marquee game on Peacock in the next 5 years. In or out on that?
Yeah, I'm just going to have to say we in, because if you're Peacock, you want the marquee game because people are going to watch no matter what. If you put Army on there, it's like, they're probably going to win. I don't really need to watch, but you put Notre Dame and Texas A&M, for example, from this season on there, everyone's going to want to watch that game. And so, yeah, everyone would want to get Peacock for that reason.
Exactly. And this will kind of be a little bit of a test balloon. How much do the numbers go up by putting Louisville as the Peacock game this year? I think that, again, Swarbrick pushed for it a few years back. They're getting a better game now on Peacock this season. And I'm like Brent, unfortunately, in on it. Like if you've got a freaking TV contract with NBC, a broadcast network, I don't know why you would want to put any game on streaming only, unless it is one of these MAC games or whatever it happens to be. But again, I can see from I guess I can still see from NBC's perspective because they're shelling out all this money, 50 million plus in rights fees. And while they sell advertising, obviously, on NBC, they get direct compensation by getting those credit card charges. And again, getting people to stick around. You stuck around for almost 4 years after buying the Toledo game in 2021. And that's what they're banking on, that people just cha-ching, 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 forget to cancel their subscription, and they get money for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. And the more people that they can get there to begin with, the more that they can do that, and the more high profile the game is, the better chance they have to do that. And look, games everywhere are going to streaming. The NBA is most likely going to leave TNT, and Amazon is going to be one of their new partners. So you're going to see streaming games there. The NFL is already streaming. Major League Baseball is already streaming. Everyone wants the streaming stuff. So I think it's going to happen. I do think that scenario, I'm definitely in on that. SR 5452. Pat Coogan loses the left guard starting job to Rocco Spindler. He's then the top backup for both guard spots and center. In or out on that?
I'm going to say we in. Last year I had Spindler being one of the guys, my breakout guys. He ended up getting a starting spot. I think you're going to see that same situation this year in fall camp.
I'm in on that as well. I think that seems to be that sure looked like that's the way things were trending at the end of spring camp when Rocco Spindler was starting to get much closer to 100%. And I think that Coogan would give you valuable depth there. And, like I've even floated the idea that if you've got all this extreme heat down there at Texas A&M in the opener, and A&M's defensive line is really that deep and that good, that maybe you rotate that third guy in with the guards a little bit to kind of, try to keep some guys fresh and that kind of thing for a series or two. And either way, it obviously sucks if you're the guy who's beat for the job, but at the same time, as from a team standpoint, gives you a ton of depth, and that's always a very valuable thing. Salty Virginia Peanuts. Marcus Freeman will coach at Notre Dame for the remainder of his career, retire with multiple national championships, and be honored with a statue. We in or we out on that?
We out. I think it's hard to say one person is going to spend their entire career somewhere.
I agree. Retire with multiple championships, honored with a statue. I think the statue comes if he wins just one championship. So I would say everything but the coach at Notre Dame for the remainder of his career, because he's still so young.
That's what I mean.
It's just so rare. I think that, just like you just said, it is just too rare for any coach to coach at one place for that long. And so I don't think that Marcus Freeman will only be at Notre Dame in his career. That's the biggest thing that I would hang up with on that statement. The other stuff, I'm not completely out on. Holt's era was divine, says pass protection is the number one question mark of what the offense can achieve in year one of Denbrock's tenure, regardless of quarterback, and be the linchpin of success/failure in the games with A&M, Louisville, Florida State, and USC. We in or we out on that? So he's saying basically everything kind of rides on the pass protection.
No, I'm going to say we out. It all rides on who's at quarterback. I think naturally the offensive line can be mediocre. I don't think it's ever going to be horrible. And if it's
at least average to slightly above average.
That's what I mean. But if it's excellent, they can be. Yeah. Right, and I think they have the potential to be excellent. I don't think they're going to be bad. I think the difference maker is who's running the offense. Is it a Jaden Daniels type guy, or is it someone who wants to be Jaden Daniels? And I think that's ultimately the difference maker in every big game. So I think you can overcome, schematically around maybe a weak spot along the offensive line, but you can't do nearly as much with a bad quarterback.
And especially if you have a mobile quarterback that helps you kind of get around whatever issues that you might have in pass protection, because he can obviously make winning plays when things break down up front. So yeah, I don't think that their offensive line play is going to make or break the season. Is it a question mark, the pass protection? Of course it is, because you've got two largely unproven tackles out there. Regardless of who the names end up being out there, they're going to be unproven because you just lost two guys to the NFL. But I've got to be out on this because of what you said. I think it still comes down to who's the guy with the ball in his hand on every play, not named Ashton Craig, the center. It's the quarterback. Absolutely right. Going back to the Peacock, Coach Bent, 574, if you're okay with putting a Chiefs playoff game only on Peacock, any Notre Dame game is open. You're absolutely right about that. But the Chiefs are also, they're one of the biggest TV. They're like last year, they were the biggest TV draw in the NFL. And so, Netflix, Peacock, NFL, they're all banking on it. Doesn't matter where the Chiefs are, people are going to flock over to see that. And I mean, the numbers there are dramatically different, because you're talking like starting at 15 million for an NFL streaming game on Amazon, for example, which is kind of roughly, I think the numbers went up last year because they had better matchups, but you're starting at 15 millions and upwards to 20, especially if it's a playoff game. You're still going to get probably 20 to 25 for that. Whereas for a Notre Dame game, you're like, for the Notre Dame games they put on streaming before, you're probably lucky if you've had a couple of million. But for Louisville, you might get 5 million, something like that, which is, again, why you're, just, I agree with what 574, what Coach Bent is saying there. If you're okay with putting the NFL there, there's no reason that you're not going to put a Notre Dame game there. So I'm going to save the last comment that we have for rapid fire. I'm going to slide it in there here in a little bit. A lot of great questions once again tonight. I think this is the fourth time we've done we in or we out, and we always have really good questions for we in, we out. Do you agree?
I do. I appreciate the thought-provoking questions. Yeah. It's not just like a we in, we out. Notre Dame should wear green uniforms this season.
Exactly. Brent, sometimes, he's like, I'm kidding, of course. DK likes to pat you on the back about your Rocco Spindler selection.
Everyone's
like you like
to
pat yourself on the back for the Rocco Spindler selection.
I mean, but wasn't it like the biggest reward, boom risk, boom
risk reward, boomer bust?
Like, yeah, that's what I mean.
I'll get it for you.
It was either going to be like, yes, this guy looks like a genius, or like this guy looks like a complete idiot. But that's the risk I was willing to take. That's what you do with the number one pick, baby.
There you go. All right, let me see. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Pew, 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 pew. Let's do it.
It has come to it. All right. So, America's troll, Colin Cowherd, says, history be damned. USC should not play Notre Dame any longer because the Trojan schedule is going to be too tough now that they're going to the Big Ten, and keeping Notre Dame serves no purpose for USC. He says the Trojans play their rival, UCLA, every year, and they don't need Notre Dame anymore. So, do you buy or sell this, Jesse?
I would have to say we sell this. And I think it's really funny. To me, like the thing I like honed in on the most from this statement is basically Colin Cowherd was saying USC played a pretty average schedule, but because they had Notre Dame, it made it a legit or strong schedule, right? And so that's the first thing that I would like to address.
Which you wouldn't have said 15 years ago.
There's no way that would have been uttered 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is what makes our schedule good, tough, go on down the line with whatever word you want to fill in there. So I think that is first and foremost. And then second, it's just like, it doesn't really matter anymore because everyone is going to be playing tough schedules, right? And so there's no reason to remove your long-standing rival. I would argue that Notre Dame is a bigger rival than UCLA because of Notre Dame's prominence and Notre Dame's, they're actually good at football, right? And so I think that has to serve into the rivalry as well when you're talking about USC and UCLA. So for those kind of reasons,
it's also more rare. Like you see them, like USC and UCLA play each other in everything every year, but it's still rare when Notre Dame comes to town, to the Coliseum.
Right. And so that's, it's just, there's so much that comes of that game outside of, is it a tough opponent? Is there this or that? It's just, Notre Dame, it's just like when USC comes to Indiana, right? Like it serves both teams, I guess is what I'm saying. So I just, Colin Cowherd loves to get up there every few weeks, not even every few weeks. It seems like every day, and just say something that he knows is just going to run with the rest of the media. But I genuinely think he believes this one. I do wonder. And if you're a fan of USC, why would you want to, again, remove such a tradition like that, right? Like, don't you look forward to the Notre Dame and USC game every year? Like, isn't it a fun rivalry where you're anticipating one team or both teams are going to be really good and it has implications on the rest of the season, right? Like, you shouldn't want to play crappy opponents. You should want to play good opponents because that is what's making you better. That is what's going to help you in the long run of your season.
Right. Coach Bent 574 says he got in here at the start of the show and he says a certain local sports talk radio guy kind of agreed with Cowherd and was asking if we are in or we out on that. Gee, I can only wonder who that local sports talk radio guy might be. Oh, well, I guess I'll have to go to my grave not knowing. But, so the conversation started, the video that I saw from his show, with Cowherd was talking about Lincoln Riley has been wanting out of the LSU series. And so Cowherd took it straight to, well, why get rid of LSU? Get rid of USC, And as I've always said, for one, Cowherd's a clown. He's a troll. He's a clickbait artist. He doesn't believe half the stuff that he's saying. Whether or not he actually believes this, like you say, Jess, I don't know. He was dismissing Notre Dame as a rival of USC, though, which
is insane.
But yeah, based on the fact, well, they've got UCLA. That's their rival. Well, no.
There's literally a trophy.
Yes. Yes. There literally is a trophy. And there literally is, like ask Keyshawn Johnson what he thinks of Notre Dame.
That's what I mean.
That'll tell you where the rivalry is.
Ask Pete Carroll.
Johnson all these years later. Who?
Ask Pete Carroll. Ask
That's
Matt
right.
Leinart. Ask Reggie
anybody.
Bush.
Ask anyone who's played in this thing that goes back to 1926. If Notre Dame and USC are rivals. And, I debated whether or not I was even going to talk about this. Brian obviously talked about it on his show. The conversation's out there now. And, it is, I think it's at least worth talking about. But the bottom line in this whole thing is sex sells, right? And Notre Dame is sexy. And they sell tickets, and they also bring big numbers on TV. And you talked about, like if you're a USC fan and a USC administrator, anyone associated with USC, when Notre Dame comes to the Coliseum, those are some of the biggest crowds that USC has at any, at any time. Go back and look historically at the kind of crowds that Notre Dame USC has brought to the Coliseum. And obviously it sells out anytime USC comes to Notre Dame. These schools and programs separated by thousands of miles, that obviously goes back to Newt Rockne. That's where it began. And, I get it. Like a lot of these rivalries are going by the wayside with all this different conference realignment. But the Irish and the Trojans have been playing since 1926. The only two times they've taken a break, World War II and the pandemic a few years ago. That's it. But this is a series that matters to both sides. It's a great rivalry. Both stadiums, again, they're always packed when they play, and it rates higher than USC, UCLA. It's going to rate higher on TV than any other game that USC plays this season. That's just the way it is. USC joined the Big Ten for what? For money, right? Because of the big, all that Big Ten revenue that they're going to get. And in today's big-time college athletics, money has always mattered, but it means even more now. Like when you got revenue sharing coming, everyone needs every penny that they can collect. And Notre Dame USC sells. It sells big. It's going to rate higher and sell more tickets than anything else that USC has got. So you can argue about, does it make sense from a competitive standpoint and all that different stuff? It makes sense from the bottom line. And I think that's why USC has no desire to see this thing go away. Like, will they still feel like that 5-10 years from now? That is a question that is probably going to have to be addressed as they get into this new world of the Big Ten or whatever comes next after that. But it's obviously ludicrous to think that USC would just want to dump Notre Dame because
for an opponent that you've played 100 years basically is for Colin Cowherd to go up there and say they don't matter, they don't need them on the schedule anymore after literally playing for 100 years, right? Like it's ludicrous to even think about, in my opinion.
Right. D-Rock Irish obviously getting in here late today. He's citing Irish Tribune that Jabron Payne has undergone ACL reconstruction and will miss the entire season. He's not expected to miss the entire season. He's going to miss the entire season. Notre Dame announced it just before our show started today, and we covered it at the start of the show. But that's been well over an hour ago at this point, so we might just want to any thoughts for people who might be with us now who weren't with us at the start of the show, Jess, on Jabron Payne missing the season after having ACL surgery? Did you hear
Sorry,
me?
I didn't know if you posed a question there.
Any thoughts? Any thoughts?
Oh, yeah,
Jabron Payne.
yeah, like we talked about a little bit earlier. I just want to see if this has a ripple effect on the rest of the running back room, right? A ripple effect of how does it affect Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, and then the ripple effect of can a freshman step up and kind of fill the role that Jabron Payne was taking on at the kind of like that third string running back flex guy who comes in on short down type situation. So yeah, I'm most curious to see kind of how it affects everyone else around him, because I think now you have the opportunity for some freshmen to step up, and I think you have the opportunity for maybe this affects, like I talked about earlier, Jeremiah Love. How does this affect his usage? Are they more cautious with him and trying to keep him injury free?
Yeah, all those things, and again, I know some people kind of getting in late, but it obviously stinks for Jabron Payne, and it affects the depth chart to the extent of kind of what you were talking about. You're still going to have Jeremiah Love at the top, Jadarian Price, those two guys 1-2. The question is going to be, can Aeneas Williams and Kedron Young, can one of them, kind of take over that goal line / short yardage type role that Jabron Payne had? I'm sure Deala McCullough has a lot of confidence in them. We talked about whether or not maybe Devin Ford comes back to the running back room. I don't think that they need to move Devin Ford back immediately. I think it is more an emergency type situation. If something were to happen to one of the other backs, then you've got a back with some experience you could slide back over from the secondary, and give you some experience over there. But I think that they'll be fine, and hopefully Jabron Payne is able to recover, and maybe we see him again, next spring. That's probably it is, I'm sure, the earliest that we're going to see Jabron Payne at this point recovering from an ACL would be next spring, if we even see him in the spring. It's hard to say exactly when that can happen. Andre with a follow-up to the Notre Dame USC, Notre Dame Southern Cal, one of the best rivalries in college football. So not really a question. I mean, I think I've got to agree with that. I think Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, USC, Texas, Oklahoma. Texas, Oklahoma is even bigger than Texas A&M at this point. Any other rivalries that you would put in that conversation up there with Notre Dame, USC, and the ones that I just listed?
I think you hit all the important ones. I mean, it's definitely, when we're talking about some of the greatest rivalries in college football history, it is up there.
I agree. Again, I think Andre said, Brian talked about the whole Cowherd thing for like an hour and a half. That is way more time than I'm going to give, that buffoon, because that's what it is. It's just buffoonery. Again, could something happen to this rivalry in the future? Sure, because nothing is safe right now. That's just the way it is. None of us would have seen USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten, leaving the Pac-12 and going to the Big Ten. No, none of us would have seen the Pac-12 just completely imploding the way it did. But it all happened. So never say never, I guess. But RJ Abatia, who covers USC and who's been on this show in the past, is going to be with us next week. So we will have a USC guy on next week to talk a little bit about this, kind of gauge what he thinks. Because remember, we're looking at this from the Notre Dame side. So, of course, from the Notre Dame side, it makes complete sense that they continue to play. But we'll kind of get RJ's perspective from the USC side and see if there could be any, kind of fissures. Maybe it goes away anytime in the near future. Hopefully not. So, an interesting question that was The last question posted in the We In, We Out thread, and this is from Peruvian Irish. With Louisville games streaming only on Peacock this year, it seems the move to streaming only games marches on. In the next 5 years, Notre Dame will have a high cost, $15 or more streaming option to view all home games, either through Peacock or a Notre Dame specific app. We in or we out on that. And he says, of course, note this doesn't include away games. What do you think about that? Will Notre Dame / Peacock have their own streaming option to view all home games, a premium, high cost streaming option?
I'm just going to say we out. And I'm just saying we out because I think that Peacock would have to offer more of a package than just that. And I think that's ultimately kind of what NBC is for. So for that reason, I'm just going to say we out.
Yeah, and the fact that NBC just, is paying Notre Dame $50 million a year,
Right.
for the rights package, I have to be out on that as well. I don't think that it's going to go all streaming by any means. Could you see the price of the streaming go up, especially when it's a Notre Dame streaming day, that kind of thing? Sure, but I don't think that they go quite this far with what they're going to do with the streaming package. Notre Dame and Navy, they announced today, that was, the big news of the day until the Payne news, unfortunately, came out. They're going to kick off at noon, October 26th, on either ABC or ESPN. So now we are waiting for the USC game time to be announced. And there is one other road game that it's not hitting me off the top of my head that we are waiting for right now. Let me see if I can find it. What do you think about the noon kickoff first for Notre Dame Navy?
Hate noon kickoff. I hate big noon football. It's just too early in the day for me, right? And so I'm just gonna, like, if this were a we in, we out, I would have to say we out because I like my Notre Dame sandwiched right in the middle. I like to get a little appetizer, game in, and then Notre Dame can be my main course, and then I get a little dessert football afterwards in the evening time. So, when you start those games early in the day, it's like, okay, you end by 3-4 o'clock. You're like, what am I supposed to do with the rest of my day? So I don't know. I'm personally not a fan of earlier games.
I like the Navy game starting at noon. I like it. So I'm definitely in on this one. I like it. And the Navy game goes fast. And, from a perspective of I've got work to do after the game, I like the fact that I'm going to be done by around 5 or 6 o'clock at night and not be going later than that. So completely selfishly, I go in on this one. There's no doubt about that. So we talked the other day about whether or not this is a make or break season for Marcus Freeman. And Kenny posted on the Champions Lounge thread that we have up. Here's what he said. Shouldn't Notre Dame fans expect to qualify for the now expanded playoffs every year? Someone responded, objectively, I think that's too optimistic because I expect the new college football playoff landscape or the new football landscape to produce more parity at the top level and be way more like the NFL. So, Jesse, where do you stand? Should the expectation for Notre Dame be in the playoff every year, or is that too pie in the sky to expect that?
I think it's too much to expect to make it every single year, but I don't think it's too much to expect to be on the footstep or the doorstep every single year, right? Like be a team that's like a first, if they don't make it, they're a first team out, right? Like it's because they went 9-3 or maybe 10-2 wasn't quite enough to get them in. But to make it every single season, I don't think that should be the expectation. I think that you should have the expectation that there is a shot to be in every single season. And whether you're, again, one of those first teams in, first team out, I think that's a different story. But to make it every single year, I would have to say out. Or I think that's a little too lofty of expectations.
I think that being in the playoff should be is it the goal every year? Like for starters?
Yeah, that's definitely the goal for sure. But to expect to make it every year, I think is a different situation. Like you're playing to make it every year. And if you fall a game short, okay, I can live with that. Right. And so like that's where I'm saying is like I'm not going to be upset if Notre Dame doesn't make the playoff every single year.
Okay.
As long as they are
That's fair.
competing and right
Yeah.
there every year.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, I think that because it's an expanded playoff of 12 teams, and even though they haven't approved the 14 team yet, very good likelihood that in a couple of years it's going to go to 14. With that many teams, all you're doing is asking Notre Dame to be around the top 14 teams in the nation. So essentially, can you go 11-1, 10-2 every year? I think that's a completely realistic expectation. So, I agree with what you're saying. The world's not going to end if they miss the playoff, but at the same time, because it is an expanded playoff and you're going to have so many teams in there, a lot of people are going to be upset if they're not in the playoff, and they're going to be really upset if they end up with an 8-4 type record. But I do think that the basic expectations should be being in the playoff year in and year out, especially again with the reconditioning that Marcus Freeman has done to the program and to recruiting and everything else. I'm going in on this. I do think that they should expect to be in the playoff every year. I think that should be the basic expectation. But again, world doesn't end if you're not, as long as you're knocking on the door. Maybe once every 3 or 4 years, you end up on the outside looking in. You're in that 15 to 20 range or whatever. But I think very realistic to expect to be in there every year. We got a lot of different stuff that we're hitting here today. I'm curious to see what you say about this one. I saw this question in a Stuart Mandel college football mailbag on the Athletic this week. Over the next decade, what's one team you're buying stock in, one team you're selling, and one team you're holding?
So one team I'm buying stock in is actually Kansas.
Ooh, interesting.
I'm holding stock on LSU, and I'm selling stock on Michigan. Boom, 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 boom.
All right. We're in the same ballpark. I'm buying stock on Notre Dame, because again, of everything that Marcus Freeman is doing, I'm going to completely buy on that. I had a tough time. Michigan and Penn State were my sell stocks.
Yeah, you can't sell Penn State because they do the same thing every year. So what's there to sell on?
Well, there are a lot of people saying that with this expanded playoff, Penn State's in a great situation because now, even though they're finishing third in the Big Ten, that they're going to get in. I'm going to sell on Michigan. I agree. I'm more sell on Michigan, and my hold is on Texas. Texas showed
I like
us
the Texas hold.
Yeah, Texas showed us they were back last year. That's like I want to see what happens, especially with them going to the SEC now. So I'm holding on Texas.
I think DK has a good one. I think you can start selling Washington. I think it's going to be a rough transition for them.
Yeah, that's a good one.
They've really maximized, and I think now you're going to see Oregon kind of really start to dominate more of that area again. Honestly, you know what I mean? It's just like you're not going to continuously hit on really good coaches at Washington, and now they're moving over. They're leaving the Pac-12, and I just think Washington's going to have a hard time.
Yep, that's a really good one. I like that. TD4ND, Texas Hold'em. That is why I didn't even think about that when I said it. So just the score bug on the TV screen has become a fixture in TV sports broadcasts. There was a time, until around, the mid 90s, which, when you were born, that score bug on the TV screen didn't exist. So my question to you, You've grown up with the score on the screen. Would you want to watch a game without the score and the time and all that stuff up there on the TV screen?
No, I wouldn't, because first and foremost, when I'm watching games, especially college and NFL games, I'm switching back and forth, right? Like I'm going back and forth. And I mean, I've told you this before. I'm a notorious muter. So if I got a game muted, I'm flipping back and forth. I got no score bug. I'm gonna have no clue what's going on, right? And so like that's the number one thing is I flip between games so much checking in that half the time I just want to see the score and where it's at, and then I can move on, right? And so that's part of it for me. A second part is I just really don't trust the game analysts to give you a full kind. If there's no score bug on there, I would not. I don't think they do a good enough job of continuously kind of updating you throughout the game. You know what I mean? And that's I just think that's where that it just naturally with the score bug where it has shifted to. So now you take it away. You know, the last thing I want is if I'm running late or tuning in, you know, maybe midway through the game and I turn it on and for 10, 15 minutes, I can't even get a score or where they're at in the game, right? And so I think that's kind of what would play into it for me as well.
Yeah, it is. This Fox was the first network to do it. Fox got the NFL in 1993. They took it away from CBS, and then CBS ultimately came back a few years later when they took the AFC package away from NBC. But they called it the Fox Box because it was like this big novel thing. And there were people who complained about having the Fox Box on your TV screen because nobody was used to it. And it was like taking up all this space. And it's like, okay, now you got the score. And, you know, you got the obviously the time, the running clock, and the whole thing. It is completely unnerving, though. There, you know, like from time to time when they'll show an old game either on the NFL Network or I don't even know if they have ESPN Classic anymore. I don't know if they still have that. But when they used to show, you know, like the old basketball games and stuff like that on ESPN Classic, it is completely unnerving to watch some of those games. And I've like, you don't have the score up on the screen and you're sitting there watching. And sometimes the announcers give them, you know, there was one particular one I was watching. It was actually Cowboys 49ers, the NFC Championship game, you know, the catch, Joe Montana to Dwight Clark and all that kind of stuff that sent the 49ers to Super Bowl 16. I was watching that last year on NFL Network and they never gave the score. And it's like, it is completely unnerving. I think we're just at a point now where you can't do without it. We're also used to having that there. And like you said, I'm a notorious flipper, just like you. I want to see the score. I want to know everything that I can. As soon as I, you know, like if you turn on the game late, I want to know what's going on in the game. So maybe it's a crutch now, but I don't think we can live without it at this point.
Well, to me, like I could get by in football or baseball, right? Because if I'm watching that game from the beginning, fine. But like, you know, I can keep track. Okay, they got a touchdown here, they got a run here. There's not a chance I could do it in basketball to keep a running tally the entire time. You know what I mean? Like that would just be so hard. And so, yeah, there's no way. There's no way I could do it.
Nope, not at all. Good point by Michael. Penn State no longer the automatic third team in the Big Ten in the new era. They're in trouble without a scoring offense. I mean, when you're bringing in these teams, USC, you know, I don't know about UCLA.
I think that's a fun question. Who's more in trouble? The Pac-12 teams coming over or Penn State?
That is a good one. I think Penn State.
I think Penn State.
Absolutely.
James Franklin's a fraud.
You and Vince share that philosophy.
I could do James Franklin's job. To never come close. You know what I mean? It's like
Brent doesn't
even come close. He doesn't even come close. That's the issue. Is like everyone's just like okay with being like, all right, Ohio State, Michigan losses this year. Okay. It's like, come on, those are your biggest games, and he's just it's okay that he loses those. And it's the same thing every year. Good to a great defense, good offensive line and run game, horrible quarterbacks that don't add any contribution to the offense.
Right. You nailed it. And that's why I think that they're more in trouble than especially especially Oregon and USC. I mean, USC's got a lot to prove in terms of what they're going to be defensively, but from an offensive standpoint, obviously they have everything that Penn State does not. So I think Penn State is in much more trouble than either one of those two teams. Aaron Donald retired at the age of 33 this offseason. ESPN's Michael Wilbon says he thinks Donald's going to play for someone this upcoming season. Scale of 1 to 10, what chance do you give that to happen?
0 out of 10. Not a single chance. He wanted to retire after the Super Bowl, but he got talked into a few more seasons. He's done everything that he needs to do. He's Defensive Player of the Year. He's All Pro. He's a Super Bowl champ. There's nothing on his bucket list or list of accomplishments that he hasn't done in college or the NFL. And so there's no shame of just going out on top, right? Like he's got nothing else to do. And so when you're 33, you've got everything done. You're still young. You got no CTE. You got money.
Right.
You got, you don't have any serious long-term injuries.
You're
like,
going
why?
to the Hall of Fame.
You got children. You know what I mean? Like, why would you do that to yourself of potentially risking, like a Ryan Shazier moment where you know what I mean? Like a freak accident where something happens. I'm all about riding out on top. And I think that's what, not to get in a tangent here, but I think that's what the Cubs are going to do this weekend with Kyle Hendricks to hit his 10-year mark. I think they're going to allow him to start a game this weekend. They're going to pull him and they're going to give him the Kerry Wood treatment and allow the fans to give him a standing ovation. And that's simply what Aaron Donald did. He got out when it was time. And like I just said, he wanted to be done after the Super Bowl, but Sean McVay convinced him to stick around a little bit longer.
Right. Exactly. And that team is far worse now than it was at that point. And just like you said, he's done everything that there is to do. He's got his Super Bowl. He's done all this stuff. He's going to the Hall of Fame. He's only 33. He can still walk. He's never had any serious injuries. It's pretty similar to Barry Sanders, a guy going out on top. A lot of people thought that they were going to be able to, like Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson, both. I think a lot of people thought that those guys were going to come out of retirement. They never did. Marvin Hagler, just like him, when he walked away after the Sugar Ray Leonard fight, he was still relative, he was getting older, but he was still in his 30s, but he never came back. Some guys are just done with it. And I think everything points to Aaron Donald was done with it. So I'll give it a 1 just on the outside chance, but I don't think he's coming back either. I think it's off into the sunset, but he's going to be a very popular guy in mid-October. I think a lot.
I give him a better chance of being a defensive line coach this season than I do him actually playing.
Wow, you think he'd coach that soon, huh?
I'm just saying, if you had to pick one or the other of what I think would be more likely, even if they're both extremely unlikely, I'm going with I think he would coach over playing.
Fill in the blank. It's blank that after Caitlin Clark drew a technical foul the other night in the Fever's loss to the LA Sparks, Indiana head coach Christy Sides said she wants Clark to talk less to officials, and she wants her and the rest of the team to focus more on mid-range shots.
It is hater energy, and I'll say that again. It is a hater energy. I don't even understand why this lady is the head coach.
I don't either.
Of the Indiana Fever, or why she signed off on them taking Caitlin Clark. Maybe she didn't even have a choice, because it seems like ever since Caitlin Clark has come into the league, all she has done is criticize Caitlin Clark rather than be like, oh, this is a
and
rookie.
Criticize her publicly.
That's what
well.
I mean. Like, publicly. This is the face of the league right now, and she is still a rookie. Like, rookies are allowed to make mistakes. They're not expected to be bona fide professional studs as soon as they walk into the league, right? And so it's just like
she dropped 30 points and she's talking about, well, she needs a better mid-range shot.
That's what it's just. It seems like every time I turn around, this coach has something else to say about Caitlin Clark, and it's like, this is Caitlin Clark. This is a once in a lifetime player. We've never seen someone like this before, and so just the amount of non-grace that she's giving her number 1 draft pick is just astonishing to me.
Stop trying to change Caitlin Clark. It's as simple as that. You drafted her for a reason. You're a horrible franchise. You had the number one pick in the draft 2 years in a row. Caitlin Clark is one of the best players to ever play women's college basketball. Has there been a learning curve? Of course, because she's played some playoff caliber teams, and it's professional basketball now, so there's been a little bit of a learning curve. But don't try to tame the stallion. Let the stallion run. That's what Lisa Bluter did at Iowa, and Lisa Bluter also didn't criticize the stallion in public. Like the whole, like you hear it, criticize in private, praise in public. And that's all that Christy Side should be doing, is talking up Caitlin Clark as much as possible whenever there's a mic and a camera in front of her. If she wants to have closed door conversations about she thinks her mid-range game or whatever needs some work, okay, whatever. But, she pulled the same thing in that game as well, where she sat her for like 5.5 minutes when they've got the lead. Second time she's done this, sitting her for extended time in the second half, and they end up blowing the lead and losing the game. And it's a completely winnable game because their only win of the season so far was against the same team in LA just a few days before. And
Caitlin Clark is is number 13 in leading scorers in all of the WNBA right now as a rookie. It's just the only thing I would criticize her game is the turnovers, but that's natural. Again,
it's going to happen. Yeah, when you're a rookie.
But right. It's just, I don't understand why.
Brando says they don't draft her to shoot mid-range shots.
Exactly,
and that's exactly right. I mean, did you watch any film on Caitlin Clark before she came to Indiana?
Ask the Warriors if they're mad about Steph Curry pulling up from three.
Right. Steph Curry changed the game. And I'm not saying Caitlin Clark is going to change the women's game in year one, even though, she's brought about a lot of change already, just like the charter flights and everything else. Play to her strengths. Don't try to change her and make her fit into some box. Remember, this is a first-year head coach herself. And I'm amazed that the Fever, even went this route, knowing they were going to draft Caitlin Clark at number one. But it's just amazing with every step Christy Sides takes. She just keeps doing sillier and dumber things, trying to change Caitlin Clark. I'm not saying that you can't coach Caitlin Clark, but you need to change your approach.
Do it behind closed doors.
Yes, exactly.
There is no place for any sort of negativity publicly around your star player. There's just not.
Right. You don't see NBA coaches making these kind of comments about NBA players in postgame press.
The best example I got is the entire world knew Zion Williamson needed to lose weight. How many times did a coach come out after a game and say, Zion probably would have played better if he was 20 pounds lighter, right?
Right. And that's the kind of stuff that this coach would be saying if,
exactly.
if he was coaching him. Yes.
So it's just dumb.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. DK probably is a little bit burnt out.
Yeah, it's so hard. They roll the college women's season right into the start of the WNBA season. So it's like there's got to be some sort of grace for that transition. And especially being the number one pick in Caitlin Clark, there's just so much buzz and media around her. Just like I completely agree. There's got to be
a lot of mental, that she goes through with all that attention. Right. That does add up over time. The cum effect of that, with all the extra attention, all the extra media that you're doing, because like Caitlin Clark is always going to be the player that, everyone wants for the post-game press conference or in all the media sessions, after practice and between games and all those different kind of things. She's always going to be the one, and she has been the one that everyone wants. And that does add up over time. Steel City coach is a diehard Canadian Notre Dame fan since the age of 8. Thanks for your kind comments on the CFL. I didn't know we made any big comments on the CFL, but you're welcome. And Andre, thanks for asking. The back is doing well. I've had a little cramps in my upper back today. Nothing, nearly as bad as the stuff that was going on at the end of the season. But the old back is rounding back into form right now. Thanks for asking. Well, Jess, I think that's going to do it for tonight. We covered a ton from start to finish, starting with Jabron Payne and all the we in and we out. A lot of good stuff. Jesse's going to be playing in a charity golf event tomorrow, so he won't be with us. Vince will be back in. And again, buddy
Vince.
RJ Abatia, USC reporter, is going to join me next week to talk a little USC. So I'm looking forward to that as well. Jess, get your swing on out there tomorrow. Hopefully the weather
plan to
holds.
win.
Good
We
day.
plan to win.
All right. Sounds good. Hit the like button before you leave. You know we appreciate it, and it helps us out greatly. So do that and subscribe. Leave us a 5-star rating on Apple. And always appreciate you being here. And we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.